Hi, I'm Teresa from Phoenix Gate Crafts, and welcome to the sixth and final section of my 2024 Texture Sampler Knit-Along. So just to run through the rigmarole one last time, this knit-along is being run in conjunction with a crochet-along, and although they are technically making the same thing, they look completely different. If you would like to find the free pattern for this section, you can find it on my blog at phoenixgatecrafts.com. If you'd like the complete pattern that includes the crochet along as well as the knit along, you can find that on my Etsy at etsy.com/shop/phoenixgatecrafts. And if you would like to join a community of crafters who are doing this along with me, feel free to join my Facebook group, Phoenix Gate Crafts Group, because I'm excellent at naming things. Since that was a lot of information, I've got everything linked in the description box, so you can go find it when and if you'd like. So, we're going to just work through this last section real quick. Personally, I feel this is the prettiest section, and you're going to have to trust me on this a little bit because it's going to look like it shouldn't work, but I promise it does. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to switch to our last color, and we're going to actually do 3 rows. The first row is going to be a knit row. The second row is going to be a purl row, so remember, purl rows, you knit 5, purl to the last marker, and knit the last 5. And then you're going to do another knit row. So let's all go do that, and I will see you back on row 4. All right, welcome back. And I know it looks like we only have 2 rows, but that's a trick that happens because of changing colors. This last knit row was row 3, and guess what? Row 3 is actually the first row of a 4-row repeat. And that's all this last section is a 4-row repeat. Nice and easy. For row 4, as always, we start with 5 knit stitches. Then what we're going to do is we're going to knit 2 together all the way across. And this is where you're going to have a little bit of faith in me that this works. Because yes, we are basically reducing the stitches we have by half. So yep, it is just your typical knit 2 together, and then you do the next knit 2 together, knit 2 together, knit 2 together. I will explain why this works on the next row. So go ahead and knit 2 together all the way to the marker, and then knit the last 5 stitches, and I will see you for row 5. All right, so this is the front side, and we have our knit 2 togethers. Now here's how this works. So row 5, what we're going to do is, of course, knit the first 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now what we're going to do is in every stitch we're going to knit front back, or KFB. And so what this is going to do, this loop is going to become very wide. It's not going to really act like a stitch to give height, the way that most of these other stitches give a little bit of height. This one's just going to become wide because we're going to knit in the front half of the loop, and then we're going to knit in the back half of the loop. So we're basically, you know how we reduced by half, now we're going to increase back up to our original stitch count. And if you look at this stitch underneath, it's not very high. And because we're knitting front back, we're going to have a bit of texture. And then, because it's not very high, it kind of pulls it down a little bit, which is perfectly fine because the number of rows we're going to do, this section is going to mirror the slightly shorter first section we did way back in the first week of this knit along. And so by doing it this way, we are setting up for the pretty part of the stitch that comes next. So we're going to go ahead and knit front and back of every stitch to the marker, and then we're going to do 5 regular knit stitches to maintain that garter stitch border. So I will see you on the end. So that was row 5, and it doesn't really look like very much at this point. This is also the back side. But the next row will really start showing off like the pretty part of the pattern, I promise. So this next row, it's going to be your classic purl row. So knit 5, purl to the last stitch marker, knit the last 5. I'll see you on the next row. All right, I'm back. That was row 6. And that's the repeat. You're repeating rows 3 through 6. So it is a knit row, a knit 2 together row, a knit front back row, and a purl row. Over and over and over again. How much do you do it? Well, if you're doing a short version, you should do this repeat 2 more times for a total of 3 times. If you're doing the regular length, the same way I am, you should do this 5 more times for a grand total of 6 times. But if you want it longer, of course, you can do it however many times you want. I just recommend having a number of repeats that kind of goes along with the other sections that you've done. So here's what I'm going to do. I want a total of 6 repeats, so I'm going to do 5 more repeats. Then I'm going to change to my main color one final time, and I'm going to do a garter stitch section. It's the last garter stitch section. Then I'll come back and show you how to count up because, well, basically this ridge you see right here, that's the knit 2 together. This is what you count to make sure you've got enough repeats. Makes it a little bit easier. But I'll be honest, it's a lot easier to see that when you actually see the whole section. So I'll show you once I've completed, then we'll deal with finishing touches. We're nearly done, guys. I hope you're having fun. Well, I am. And with that, we have actually finished the final section. So there is an easy way to count up. You see these textured lines? Basically, you need to have 6 of these if you are going to be doing the regulation size. You need to have 3 of them if you are doing a smaller size, or however many you want. Like, this is your project, make it your own. So now we are going to be binding off. Now you can bind off in any way that you like. If you did a special cast on with an equivalent bind off, I would do that so that both ends look basically the same. I did the German twisted cast on, so I'm going to just do a regular bind off, but I'm going to try and do it loosely. If you want, you can size up your bind off needle, but you know, it's just your basic bind off where you do knit stitches and then bind off, and then you do a knit stitch and then you bind off. Now, there is a thing you can do. I usually size up for this. This is a 6mm crochet hook. But basically what you do is you go in like you're going to do a knit stitch, pick up a loop, and then just pull it through. I find this a little easier to go loose. Just make sure that you actually push your hook into the stitch. That was my husband's fault. I have no control over that. So that way this loop is a little bit looser, so your bind off winds up looser. And with that, you're going to go all the way across. Now there is something special I do at the end that I feel just kind of makes everything look a little neater on one end, on that final end. So I will catch up to you there, and I'll show you the last bind off stitch. Alright, I'm at the end. I have this lovely bind off. And here's what I like to do for the last stitch. So I do go in to pick up a loop like I normally would, except I also try to pick up this loop on the edge. So I wind up putting them both in there, and then I kind of, it's almost like a knit two together, which the crochet hook doesn't like as much. I may have split that stitch. And then I pull up a loop and pull through like normal. And then when everything is kind of said and done, and I drop my other needles, it actually winds up looking very uniform at the edge. And then I just pull up a loop, pull through, pull tight, cut. And now, because I've been weaving in the ends all the way along, I only have one end to weave in. Now, if you like, you can leave this end very long. I did not do that just now, so I'm going to go ahead and weave this in. So I messed that up, but when you sew everything up, if you're sewing everything up, just know, make this longer, make this a good 1.5 feet or so. So that way you have enough to sew everything up. So now, if you give it a quick wash and block, you have the option of being done now if you want to leave this as a blanket. If you are not going to leave this as a blanket and you are somebody who likes to block your finished items, I recommend weaving in ends and blocking now. Leave those long tails that I've mentioned previously, the one at the beginning and the one at the end, but other than that, make sure everything is woven in so that way you don't have to do it after sewing. You only have to deal with your sewn stuff. So wash it, block it, let it fully dry, weave in all the ends so that you are ready to fold this and sew it into a shrug. So if you hold tight for 1 second, I will show you how to measure this for size and how to fold this so that you know where to sew up and how big to sew up. All right, welcome to my voiceover sound quality, but this is the completed project, bottom to top. So there's a couple ways you could do this. You could do it call-wise or width-wise. It should come down to your knee when you have it up to your neck, or if you're doing it more sideways, it should go from one elbow to the other and only come down to about mid-thigh. That way you know it's a proper size for you. It's a little tricky to measure elbow to elbow. It's a lot easier to do it hand to hand, but just kind of get it into the crook of your elbows and make sure that it's bigger than your elbows or wherever you want it to come up to. This is something that can be done that looks good short sleeve, but around your back comes to your elbows. You could also have it taller if you'd prefer. Now, there's two ways to fold it. Make sure that the wrong side or the back side is the inside. So you can fold it top to bottom and line up the corners. So the first section lines up with the last section. Or you could do it the way I'm doing it, which is more sideways. You still make sure the insides are together, the wrong sides are together, and you fold it corner to corner. And what you'll do is you'll go from the two corners that meet up, and you will sew up towards the bend. See that bend? And you will start sewing from the corner to a spot that you feel is comfortable for you. And there is an easy way to tell if it's a good size. Stick your arm in it. That's where you want your arm in. And you put a stitch marker there. In that spot where I've got my hand, that's not on the corner, in the middle there. Then what you're going to do is you're going to measure the same distance on the other side and stick a stitch marker in that position too. So that way you're going to be sewing up both sides towards your fold. And just remember both sides so that you have two sleeves. This is me trying to show you how to measure it so you're in the exact same place. On both, you put your stitch markers there and you've got two similar, if not exactly the same sized, sleeve holes. Got it? Got it. So I made some samples. These are a little tricky because you could sew up in different ways. The way I showed you is going to have the top, the bind off, seaming with the bind off, and the cast on seaming up with the cast on. If you're choosing a different way, you're going to be going up kind of the selvage edge, so to speak. I'll be talking about that a little bit more later, but let's start with the side that is the bind off, because most bind offs leave with this lovely little, what looks like a chain on the top. And this is actually the easiest thing to do when you are doing mattress stitch, which is what I'm going to have you do. Now, it's a lot easier if you have a piece coming out that you left that's about 2 to 3 times the length that you want to go. You know, honestly, 2 times is just fine. It gives you plenty of extra as a just in case. However, if you didn't leave yourself that, or if you are somebody who weaves in your ends and then uses something different, I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, you want the right sides facing out. You can't tell, this doesn't actually technically have a right side or a wrong side, but you want the right side facing out because this will be an invisible seam. And what you do is you have to decide if you're going to be sticking your needles into the center or from the center out. I typically do it out to in. That'll make more sense in a minute. So to start, we find our very most edge corner, wherever that is. You always want to be under 2 loops. Get this to focus. You always want to be under 2 loops. And you pull through. And by the way, I'm only going to the stitch marker because remember, I had you mark the spot where you want your sleeve to go. And I'm right-handed, so I'm going that way. If you're left-handed, you'll go that way, but go from the corner edge to that mark, because you're going to have a loop over here that is going to be your sleeve. So leave a little bit, a couple of inches, and go out to in, right? And then in the exact same spot, go out to in. It'll be coming the other way, back to front, whereas this one was front to back. And then pull, and then go back in the exact same spot your original stitch was in. Make sure that your working thread is out of the way because you don't need to be coming up in a weird spot. And then pull it super tight. Usually at this point I take this and I stick it over the other side. But remember, we just came from this side, so now we're going to go this way. And we're going to start looping around this tail, effectively weaving it in at the same time. Then we go to the next stitch. See how we went in here? We're going to go to the next stitch and go under 2. Pull tight, but you don't have to pull too tight yet. Then you go to the next stitch, which I believe is, you can always follow where your stitches have gone. Helps to do this in a contrasting color. But make sure this is over that. And see how it holds that down. And then go into the next stitch. You'll get a sense for this as you do it a little bit more. Then you go into the next stitch. Did I skip one? Nope, there's the black. And then go into the next stitch. You can see it. It's a little harder to tell, and honestly, if you get most of the stitches, you're doing good enough. And you're like, well, I can totally see that. Yeah, I know. There's a magic thing that will happen in a minute. But after you've done about a dozen stitches, front and back, I'll show you once I get to this marker. Well, I'll show you a little earlier than that. And by the way, if you kind of like the look of these stitches, you could just leave it like this. But if you want it invisible, you're going to do this the proper way. Well, you should. The cool thing is, this is your project. You can do it however you like. If you just want to turn it inside out and whip stitch it, that is your choice as well. But now that we've gotten past that, look. You're going to pull on this, and it just zippers up. I went a little too far. Usually every inch or so you do it. But yep. And you can see where you just came out of, which is up here. So you can continue. didn't go in that one. You can kind of tell because the stitches are held. Something that also helps is whenever you're going to do a pull tight, every few stitches, pull it once you've come through the same direction. And you can see how, although yes, I didn't do it often enough, I didn't pull tight soon enough, you can see how here where it is pulled tight, it is, even with completely contrasting yarn, completely invisible. And even if you do it less, if you're doing this in the same color that you did your main color, this won't be very noticeable at all, even if you don't pull it tight properly. That's why I like mattress stitch. It's actually very forgiving. And here is where, if you didn't get your stitch marker exactly in the same number of stitches, that is okay. At this point, you can just kind of pick which one. And then before you do anything, just make sure that this matches up with the other side so that hopefully your holes are the same size. But there is a special way to finish off. Now, I always pull once I've gone through the back, so I know that the next one I need to do is the front. And then I didn't do this one. And remember, always go under 2 loops. It just holds it a little bit sturdier. And you want to go to the stitch marker. Pardon my stuffy nose. We have entered fire season. And now it's up to you whether you stop at the stitch in front of your stitch marker or you go into your stitch marker stitch. Entirely up to you. I'm going to just take off the stitch marker and I'm going to pull. But now that I've done that, the important thing is I go back through and I loop once, which is why you typically do this in the same yarn as you ended. I go there, and then I go all the way through the same direction again. And then you go under, and I know a lot of people who knit are like, no knots, but it does hold it nice and secure. And you really won't feel this because what you'll do is you'll pull it open and go to the inside. So we've been dealing with this side. Now we're going to pull it through this side. And then you see how it kind of goes down. You're just going to split some stitches and go down the middle of that zipper. And weave in your end. This is why I like a bent tip tapestry needle, because it just kind of makes this easy. So you go here and then you go a little bit further down and then you go back up, trying to split your yarn that you're sewing up with. If you can. If you can't, it's not that big a deal. And typically you go in 3 different directions, then just go a little bit further down. Remember, you're entirely on the back side, splitting stitches wherever possible to make sure it is tight. And then you cut right next to it. Better than that, it slipped. And you will have something virtually invisible if you're not using a contrasting thread. Now, this was the bind off. It becomes a little bit more tricky if you're doing a cast on edge or the rough edge. Now, I'm not going to weave this in. Pretend that I did, but the thing I recommended for you to do was to leave an extra long tail so that you can use it to sew up the edge. Now, I'm going to do this off the bottom. Just remember that if you're doing this on the edge, you know what, I'll show you the edge after I do this. So this is actually coming out here. So we don't even need to worry about this one. I'll also show you in to out. Because this is coming out, I will go in to out on this one. So I will go to the very corner and I will go in to out. So this will be the opposite of what I showed you last time. And look, that is now secure because this is part of the yarn you were using for the piece. It is perfectly secure. And now, as best as you can, going under 2 stitches, which is a little difficult because this doesn't exactly have what looks like a chain. So you're just going to have to do your best guess, and whatever you do, do evenly. So best guess works just fine, especially since it's going to be hard to see regardless of what you do. And you'll get into a rhythm. And I always do the back one. This way is actually a lot easier to see than when you're going out to in. But then give it a pull. And because you just went out and you can see where you're attached, you can kind of figure out the next one. We'll do here. And this winds up working up so super duper fast. All right, take out the stitch marker and you can see how that is invisible. With this yarn, it just looks like where to meet. This works in knitting, it works in crochet, it works in Tunisian crochet, and then I just finish it off by going front to back and pulling tight, going into that I just made, making a little knot just to be a little extra secure because remember, I'm making mine with machine washable yarn. You don't want this coming out in the laundry. Bring it through to the back and then weave in your ends. Even though you're going to be doing a longer distance than what I just did, it shouldn't take you more than 20 minutes to finish this off. And since you're already geared up, might as well just weave in this last end. Ta-da! That's the inside, that's the outside. And I'll show you the weird edge because this works no matter where you're going. Though I'm not going to sew in this end. Because you could even go, if you're ever sewing 2 pieces together, you can go just all the way to the end and then do your little tie-off thing at the very end. So this one was attached to this side, so I just go, whoops, here. And then you just kind of pick your spacing just like before. This one's a much shorter thing. And go under. See what happens when you go under one? That doesn't work. You need to go under 2 yarns. Because you want this to be sturdy. You can kind of see how there's 2 here. You can usually go in like there. And there. And there. And there. And there. And yep, that's under 2. And then it's very yarn efficient because you just pull it. And even though we've got a corner here that we wouldn't normally have, yeah, pretty much give it a tug away from each other, and that is invisible. So I hope you found this helpful. Sew up your final project and put it on. Enjoy. Stay warm. This is the final piece of this project, the final section. You are now complete. Project complete. I hope you enjoyed it. You know, like, share, subscribe, all that jazz. And happy crafting. Bye.